This is The Express with Gary Allen, your 360-degree view of the world. Now, here's your host, Gary Allen.
And welcome to this edition of The Express. And good evening to all of you. And I think David is on the line. David, hang on, and I'll be with you in just a couple of minutes. This is indeed Gary Allen, and I am very happy to say hello to all of you. For those of you that want to keep up with what's going on, go to my Facebook page at Gary Allen, A-L-A-N. Go to youtube.com for Gary Allen The Express. You can catch some of all my past shows. This show will be on there as well. You can also on Thursday nights at 7. David, I hear you. Hang on. Thursday nights at 7 p.m. This program will repeat itself at diversitybroadcastnetwork.com as well as progressivevoices.com on their demand or app channel. Just want to say a special hello to everybody out there. Randy Jones, thank you so much. I know you listen every week to what we're doing. We have some very, very interesting things coming up in the not-too-distant future.
Hello?
Yeah, David, I hear you. I hear you. Hang on.
Okay.
Hang on, and I'll be with you in just a couple of minutes.
All
right, I've got some great news to share with everybody. Starting on April 3rd, I'm going to be doing a radio show for my station here in Cocoa Beach, and I'll let you know where you can go online to hear that because it will be heard worldwide as well as about 3 FM stations here in Central Florida, and I'm very excited about getting that program. My program director and owner, John Harper, has seen fit to give me the opportunity to do that. Also, to all of you out there, I want to thank EW for being on the other end of the control panel to make sure that everything is going well. And is there anything in particular before we get to my guest tonight, which is a very nice gentleman, David K. Jackson? Is there anything, EW, you want to say to everybody out there? Anything going on with the TMV?
As of right now, I'm just going to leave it to where you and your guest have an awesome show.
Well, then by all means. My guest tonight is David K. Jackson. He has written a wonderful book called Life in the Second Half. David K. Jackson is a pastor, life coach, motivational speaker, certified personal trainer, writer, and proud former of the United States Marine Corps, although I've learned through my own father and many friends who were in the Marines, once a Marine, always a Marine. He has served as the elite Marine Security Guard Embassy Program, a promising author, a teacher whose views on faith and hope are both unique and prophetic. Jackson is a very passionate and believes in faith is a vehicle that can cure all ills. Ladies and gentlemen, my pleasure to welcome to the Express Mr. David K. Jackson. David, thank you so much for taking a few minutes out of your day to join us with my audience.
The pleasure is all mine, Gary, and thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, absolutely. I know you're over there in Alabama, I believe, correct?
I am in Alabama presently, yes.
You know, I as a performer, I used to perform in a lot of southern towns with some of the great acts in show business. And I remember, I always use this as a joke, but it's so funny. When I was in Mississippi once, I asked a bartender where the local Jews hang out. And he said, you see that tree over there? So.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a joke. But anyway, David, on the back part of your book, on the back cover, you talk about life in the second half, but you also mention that life is a game. It is, isn't it? I mean, it truly, truly is. The better you're prepared for it, the better off you possibly can do as compared to somebody who is not prepared for life. I've always said to young people when I've talked to them, the best ammunition for life to be a success is to learn as much as you possibly can, to be as well-rounded as you possibly can, and to be as prepared mentally and physically as you can for life. Because life is like a football game or a basketball game. It throws things at you that come out of left field, and sometimes being prepared allows you to get through the obstacles. It's like someone says, why do I need to learn algebra? Well, maybe not the algebraic aspect of it, but the being able to solve problems. So life is a game, and the better you're prepared, the better off you might end up. Is that a bad way to put it, or is it a good way to put it?
No, absolutely. It's an incredible way to put it, in fact, Gary, and I'm in total agreement. We simply use a game, use life as a game, and it's a all too familiar term to some and to others. It's an introduction, I suppose, but we see life as a game most of the time, and so we parallel the game of life with the games of football and basketball, as you had mentioned. Mm-hmm. And our challenge is to remind people that, such as the games of basketball and football, you have two halves, 4 quarters, more importantly. But the 2 halves, and no matter who wins the first half, if you lose the second half of the game, you've in fact lost the game of life. And mm-hmm. so the opportunity is to find whatever the challenge or the disappointment may have been in the first half, use it that it might empower you rather than imprison you for the second half, and prepare to win. And the possibility of winning is greater than being stuck in the first half, mourning the things that have happened, the things that you can't change. If you should take them and embrace them rather than, again, allowing them to imprison you. Mm-hmm. I think we're all better as a result of those decisions.
Yes, I have seen many, growing up as a young man in South Florida, I saw a lot of young people that I went to high school with who were brilliant in high school. Absolutely, were straight A students, went on. I went somewhere else. I didn't exactly go right off to college, but they went right off to college. And then by the time they got in their second year of college, they were burned out. Is it also a matter of pace? I mean, you want to be the best student you can, obviously, in school. But is it a matter of pace? You have to pace yourself like an athlete in life. You have to not consume up all the energy in the first half, but you got to leave a little bit left over for the third and fourth quarter.
I would simply say, Gary, and yes, to answer your question, but in addition to that, I would say that it's about discovering you, identifying Gary, identifying and realizing the shortcomings, the great heights, the highest achievements that Gary has accomplished, and understanding that one extreme or the other does not describe accurately who Gary is, because Gary could have a bad day, but that doesn't make Gary a bad person. Gary could be perfect on the exam, but that doesn't make Gary perfect. So we have to find that balance and learn to circumvent the tough days, the tough times, and understand that no two people's directions or no two people's lives are going to be the same. So it will be a challenge for those that have persevered and prospered through high school and get to 2 years of college and all of a sudden hit a wall. Right. For myself or you to determine that they have peaked out. Okay, we would simply say that's the first half. Now, what we have to discover is, and there are 2 questions that I like to challenge people in order to gain such information. And that is, what can I learn from this, and what can I teach from this? And if whatever the challenge or the obstacle is or becomes, if you ask that question, it will reward you with answers. Now, the question is, are you ready for the answers that could possibly be rewarded to what you're asking?
There's the rub. Are you ready for the answer of the question? We're talking to David K. Jackson, the author of Life in the Second Half. We win no matter what happened yesterday. Today is your second half. You know, it's funny too, David. When I was in high school, I was there. Okay, I was not an in-crowd person. I was not an out-crowd. I was there. I really didn't apply myself. And it wasn't until my senior year of high school that they discovered this thing called dyslexia that I suffered from. And it goes more with math than it does anything else. But my point that I'm trying to make is that in my high school class, there was a young man who was actually written in his yearbook. I didn't buy those silly things because I saw them sitting on the shelves of my sisters and brothers, and I didn't want to waste my money worrying about people that I really didn't. I'll be honest with you, David, when I got out of high school, I couldn't wait to get out of there. I really couldn't. I just wanted to get out in the world and find out where I belonged and what it is that I wanted to do. I knew what I wanted to do, but I knew it wasn't going to be in Hollywood, Florida. But they wrote in this guy's yearbook, and I'm not going to mention his name, he was voted by teachers and by some students the least likely to succeed in our high school graduation class.
Wow.
Do you know? Well, you obviously you don't, neither do my listeners. This young man just retired about 5 years ago from the United States Air Force a 3-star general.
Awesome. Awesome.
He went into the Air Force like I did. He was smart enough. He didn't excel in high school, but he did when he got into the Air Force has a program to send you off to college, like a lot of the military different divisions do, and services do. And he excelled. And they sent him to war college and everything else after he got his degree. He worked his way up quickly through the ranks, and he retired a 3-star general. The girl who was voted most likely to succeed by said people ended up one of the biggest porn stars in the history of pornography.
Good night.
I mean, so it goes back to what my father used to say. You cannot judge the book by its cover. You can't judge the child by what the adult will be.
Absolutely. And I might add, Gary, if you will,
Sure.
I share with people all the time that their opinions does not have to become your facts.
Yes.
People's opinions does not have to become your fact. And to listeners with children or anyone that's challenged, today it could very well be the first half. Tomorrow, right now, can be your second half. You don't give up where you are, because it's not over, no matter how dire it looks, no matter what they're saying. And I tell a joke all the time, Gary. You might get a kick out of this. When I'm doing talks, motivational speeches or what have you, I ask the question, has anybody seen Day lately? And everybody look like, who? Day. Has anybody seen Day? I'm looking for Day. Everywhere I go, I'm trying to meet Day, because, Day said you wouldn't make it. They said you'd never be anything.
Yeah.
And then when the rumors and the gossip gets going, they said, and they tell me, but everywhere I go, Gary, nobody seems to be able to introduce me to Day. So that's why I formed the opinion that they really don't matter, because nobody knows who they is anyway.
Yeah, I mean, who are they? Which brings me to this question that, do you think people fail to achieve what they are to really should achieve, what's inside them, the creativeness, the whatever, whether it be a doctor, lawyer, author, motivational speaker, airline pilot, surgeon, whatever the case may be, a good teacher, because they're afraid of what they hear from their friends, and maybe they have a sense of lack of worth within inside themselves?
Absolutely. I believe that the power of life and death is indeed in the tongue. Words hold power, and we have to be careful with what we assemble around ourselves and what we assemble ourselves around. In other words, I share with people all the time, you want to be where you're going to be celebrated, not tolerated.
Yes.
And if you know who you are, it is your responsibility to begin to live out what it is, the vision that you've been given, the dreams that you have. And you can't expect others to believe in Gary. That's nobody's responsibility but Gary's.
Right.
And when people don't believe, that should be the incentive to go out and set about to give the days in life the displeasure of having seen you or witnessed you succeed.
Talk a little bit about your growing up, because your family was a major influence on your success. And there are points, I would imagine, in your life where it could have gone completely the other way, and you might not necessarily be on the air with me tonight, or a minister or a motivational speaker. Talk about how important it is to have the right people in your corner, family-wise, friends, to help you get where you need to be, because contrary to what some people say, there's nobody that's self-made. Donald Trump can say he is, but he isn't. There are people along the way that have to be pulling for you and recognize your talent. Talk about how important your family was to you. Long
story short, Gary, I tell the story all the time about the Candy Lady's son, the Candy Lady's son. In our neighborhood, where my mother presently lives, was the home of my grandparents here in Montgomery, Alabama. And because we were in a rural area at the time, Montgomery's grown such since that time, but at that time it was a very rural area. There was no store. So my grandmother took it upon herself to become the Candy Lady. So everyone in the community knew me as the Candy Lady's son. Now, what I didn't mention was the fact that my mother had me at 16 years old. And you go back to 1966, you can consider the times and conditions. It was not a very popular thing. In fact, she was instructed, told, insisted that she should abort. When she stuck to her guns and decided to bring forth my life via birth, She was told to place me up, to give me up for adoption. But my mother had a plan. My mother knew. She said that it was something about this child that God had told her that was gonna, change, was gonna make a difference in the world. Those were her words. And though my grandparents reared me, and I share with people all the time, Gary, we've gone from a nation of villages to a nation of islands. And that is so unfortunate because although we should not be dependent upon anyone for anything except God, we have to learn to function in interdependence because there's something that Gary has that I can use. Perhaps there's something that I have that you can use, but we'll never know it except that we establish communication and interdependence. My grandparents played a key role in instilling in me who I was, that I came from something. I wasn't, quote unquote, forgive the terminology at the time. It was a very common term. I wasn't a bastard child. I was a child of purpose, a child of destiny, in that God had something in store for me, and if I stayed focused, and I tell the story all the time, all those things born in the cradle of Confederacy, black male to a teenage mother. Today, society would condemn me and cast me off for no good. But God had a plan, and I tell people all the time that we don't know what the outcome will be if we trust God in our lives. And that's not for everybody. And I understand there are some I don't believe in a relationship with God. I understand. But my level of faith came about as a result of what a spirited relationship, the difficulties, the challenges. And I tell the story in the end of this way, that how likely is it that a child born in Montgomery, Alabama, in the cradle of Confederacy in the Deep South, the child of a teenage parent, could end up in Moscow, Russia, having met and interacted with President Reagan's entire cabinet? Go figure.
Yeah. Well, hey, listen, I was born in a little town in Pennsylvania called Wilkes-Barre. I'm his adopted child. I was adopted 3 days after I was born. Lived in poverty a good part of my life until I was reunited with my mother and father. I was shipped off to Wilkes-Barre again when they were having some problems. And to think that I've come this far. And one of the things that I did, and you don't know this, David, because we didn't discuss it, but when I was in the Air Force, my final job, I carried the football on Air Force One for President Gerald Ford.
Oh, wow.
And I was with the 89th Airlift Wing. As a matter of fact, I just got a beautiful picture today from the Thunderbirds, who I got through interviewing last weekend. And there was a young man, as part of that, Speedy Gonzalez. That's his call sign, Speedy Gonzalez. He's from South Florida, where I'm from. And he and I got along well, and they sent me a beautiful picture of the Thunderbirds signed by every one of the members of the crew. And I'm going to get it framed real soon and get it up here on my office wall. But nobody ever gave me a chance. Even my mom and dad were like, you're not applying yourself. You're not doing anything. But I always knew there was something for me. I didn't ever think I was going to be a millionaire or a superstar or anything. But here's a guy who suffered from dyslexia in school, didn't apply himself. I think if you believe in yourself and you trust in God, and which brings up, when did God enter your life? Was it through your mom and her strong beliefs that gave you the strong foundation to keep you moving forward?
Absolutely, Gary. To answer your question, I would have to say, when was God not in my life? Now, I wasn't always obedient to his will, but it was always something. And because my grandparents were elderly, the wisdom that my grandfather instilled was just uncanny. And a lot of the things that he instilled and his way of teaching and on and on and on still follow me today. They still haunt me, but in a positive sense, because it challenges me to be the best. And he would tell stories that just, you walk away scratching your head trying to figure out what in the world is he talking about. But 30, 40 years later, I'm walking into the understanding of what he's saying. And being around elderly people gave me a compassion for the elderly. It gave me a different view on life. And if that wasn't enough, my mother never gave up, got herself together, married a gentleman that was in the Army. I ended up going to high school in Germany. How about that?
No, that it's service brats, they learn. they travel around the country. They learn to acclimate themselves to the current conditions. They learn about different types of people, cultures, etc. And it is a wonderful education. Now, some may not agree with it 100%, but I was watching a thing about John Denver the other night. I didn't realize his father was a general in the United States Air Force, a pilot. And while they had a divided relationship, there was a division between the two of them. They kind of came together towards the end before his father passed away. We're talking to David K. Jackson, the author of Life in the Second Half. We win no matter what happened yesterday. Today is your second half. We're going to get to more of the book here in just a little bit. You know, David, Lou Holtz, who I went to the University of Miami, so I'm not exactly a Notre Dame Lou Holtz fan, but he has. Yeah, I loved Alabama, by the way. I think they're the best program in football, although the Canes, we'll get our convicts back and we'll be okay. But Lou Holtz said 4 important things that someone should have, 4 keys to hopefully being a good person and success in life. And the 4 are something to believe in, someone to hope for, something to do, and someone to love. And I've always kind of taken that approach along with another approach that someone who I knew at a very young age, and that was Johnny Unitas, said, if you take no the first time, you'll never get anything done in life.
Absolutely.
So with that said, what motivates David?
What motivates David is the fear of dying full of the visions, the dreams, the inspiration that God has placed in me. There's a poem or cliche, I suppose, that's in the book, and you may have noticed it, Gary, and it simply says, it begins today. It begins with me. No longer will I wait. I begin now to say, because I know what I say, I am going to see because of the power that God has placed within me. So I speak life to my every situation, not according to how I feel, but as it is written in God's will. And that came about in a time when it didn't look real good. It didn't feel real good. And that intestinal fortitude, that it begins today, it came from inside. There was nothing around me that gave any indication that I would one day be on the phone with Gary Allen. Something said, go on, you know, and it's not about how you feel. And then the words, the text and scripture that lines up with that cliche gave me the strength to see it, to manifest it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. In your book, in the first chapter, you talk about playing hurt. Explain that, because it isn't what people may think of when you think of playing hurt. And also, I want to talk about it as well. So first, talk about playing hurt and how it involved your life and how it can help other people overcome their obstacles.
Well, again, the term alone, brings about several thoughts. I would suppose the audience immediately, when they heard the term playing hurt, would begin thinking about football. But again, we parallel the game of life with the games of football and basketball. And sometimes in our coaching and playing sports, we had to play hurt. You had to take it for the team. It had to be bigger than you. If it was an injury, that was, doable, you sucked it up and you went out. And as a Marine, we were taught to play hurt, to go. You go regardless of how you feel. Again, it's about your will, your determination. Your determination is bigger than what it is that you're dealing with. And sometimes in life, there are injuries, and they might not be physical injuries. They can be emotional injuries. They can be mental injuries that causes us to appear to be injured. But we have to remind ourselves that though our physical or our mental or emotional bodies are injured, we are bigger than our moment. We can go on beyond that. And we can manage to win even injured sometimes. If we take our minds off of ourselves. And like I mentioned earlier, Gary, it's so amazing that the world that we live in now is not about team anymore. See, team used to mean together each accomplishes more. That no longer exists. That mindset is a rarity now. We live in a society now where if you show up, you get a trophy. Where years before, if you didn't earn it, you didn't get a certificate, let alone a trophy. And the coach instructed you to come back next year. This is what you work on. And if you get better, you get a trophy like Gary got a trophy. But if you don't, then Gary will get the trophy next year. It was incentive. It wasn't him disliking David.
Mm-hmm.
It was him encouraging and challenging David to do what Gary has done, work, and you can earn it.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, in a little bit down the way, it's a winner never quits, yet a quitter never wins. And then you go on to say a few sentences down, from the depths of your pain will arise the greatness of your power. Talk about that.
Well, no pain, no gain. We've heard that before.
Mm-hmm.
And the inspiration that I received was to the more pointed and more direct to the fact that from your pain comes your greatest power. From your pain comes your greatest power. And I'm sure your listeners are tuning off right now, like, oh, God, who's this guy? He's crazy. But here it is.
Mm-hmm.
When we embrace our pain head on, what we'll discover is within our pain lies our power. And now this sort of segues into the it thing, Gary. And I know I might be getting ahead of myself, but
no, that's okay. No, whatever it takes, whatever gets us there.
The Bible, and I use as an example in the book when I talk about the it factor in dealing with pain and power. One example was the woman with the alabaster box. And I share the story all the time. What she did differently than a lot of us or each of us as endeavored to do is she came to terms with her it. She came to terms with her pain. Mm. And the difference was, and it begins, the text opens up inquiring or reminding us that the disciples had indignation with it. And I point out to people, now how amazing is it that the disciples had indignation with what she had rather than who she was. And then I go on to remind people, Gary, that, oh, by the way, she was a woman of the night, a streetwalker, a hooker. So here it is. They had to point out what she had because for them to describe who she was to Jesus would have explained to him that they had been where she was. And who wants to look bad? So in their efforts to be wicked or wise, they ultimately condemned themselves. But the concern was not about who she was. The concern was about the very thing that they called themselves condemning her for, what she had, her it. And so our it represents our pain. And what she did, I'll fast forward, I know we have to get on here. Ultimately, the story ends with her taking her it, Gary, and slamming it to the floor or breaking it. And as we know, the story ends with her breaking her it, the alabaster box. And Scripture records that the oil did run. And not only did it run, but she took that same oil with her hair and her tears, and she wiped the feet of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ.
Yes, and he also commented that, and I'm paraphrasing here, so you're a pastor, so you'll correct me. I believe his words were something to the effect, I've never seen somebody with such strong belief and such humility. None of you have washed my feet when I came into the room. And they all kind of, and people forget, Jesus didn't come here to be served.
Right.
Jesus came here to serve, which takes us into another part of the book, and I'll get to that in just a minute. But I want to read one passage, page 11 here in the first chapter, kickoff. We should approach our life challenges from the perspective that it's only a season. No matter how good or bad it's only a season. Talk about that, because some people, we all go through turbulent times. One of my favorite pastors of all time is Dr. Charles Stanley, and I know you know who that gentleman is.
Absolutely, yes, sir. He's
one of my dearest gentlemen that I love very much, and I listen to him all the time. I have some friends that work for his ministry, and he always talks about God sometimes gives us conditions to grow, to learn, to get closer to him. But talk about overcoming those obstacles, those moments of deep depression and pain as compared to the happy times. We all can enjoy the happy times, but talk about those deep times where the pain is so unbearable that people want to give up, but you can't give up. You have to keep moving forward. You have to keep, you can't quit. You cannot quit.
Absolutely. Well, in describing, as you read in the book, that it's simply a season. And in that season, I remind people that our good times, and hear this, Gary, our good times with God prepare us for our bad times for him. Our good times with God prepares us for our bad times for him. See, we're called upon, as you mentioned a few minutes ago, and here's another cliche, and the Lord just gave me this revelation a couple weeks ago. Gary, everybody in the room now is waiting to be served.
Yeah.
Everybody in the room is waiting to be served, but nobody's willing to serve. Therefore, nothing is happening in the room.
Right.
And this is what
everybody thinks they're entitled.
Yeah, everybody's waiting to be served. And there are no servants. When we were sent here, our assignment was to serve. He said, "If you love me, feed my sheep." When you look at the term, he says, "They that wait." You look at the term of a waiter. You discover this is a person that takes an order, and he goes someplace to get what you ordered, and he comes back and he delivers it. And then once you got no order, he assists and assures that your order is properly cared for, that you receive what it is. That's a servant.
Right, right.
That's who we're supposed to be. So in those seasons when it appears to be seasons of lack, seasons of doubt, seasons of dismay, seasons of depression, this is where our memories become so paramount. And I challenge in the book as well, Gary. You probably read this part as well. If you won before, remember what it took for you to win on that occasion or in that season. And if you've never won before, remember what it feels like to have never won. And this should be your motivation, because this season will pass. Even if you're having a championship, here's a perfect example. You were talking about the University of Alabama and how great the football team is. They started spring training here in the state today. But guess what, Gary? They didn't start spring training remembering. I could imagine how Clemson defeated them in the last game.
No, I don't think your head coach there, Nick Saban, would allow him to go that far back.
And so our motivation and our strength has to be with the same determination. They endured a season where they should have been undefeated, but they lost a game.
Yeah.
Now the question is, what are you going to do about it? And guess what? Eventually, that season passed. You can go back and look at the film, but you can never undo that season.
No,
but guess
what's done is done.
Season coming.
Yeah, what's done is done. I'm going to get to chapter 7 here in just a minute, unsung heroes, because I think that's really, really important. But there's something I want to talk about that I don't think you covered in the book, and I've read 90% of this book. People today seem to be in search of all the wrong people in all the wrong places for the answers that are right there. They're looking for that new Zen master, that new wave religion, that new holistic healing properties from this and that. And that's fine to a certain extent. But God is there. He's not gone anywhere else. And the Bible is relevant today as it was when it was first started to be produced. The Old Testament, my people, the Jews, the Old Testament came about because we were wandering in the desert for 40 years, and somebody had to come up with something to entertain people, which is why the Old Testament existed. It's a joke. Right. But people today are looking in all the wrong places for all the wrong answers to their questions. They get the wrong answers, and eventually they come back to God, and they go, "Wow, you were here all along. Why didn't I see it?" And I think that's propagates a lot of the problems that people have today. Now, organized religion or believing in God may not be for everybody. I understand that. And there are a lot of people who don't believe in God. They don't believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of Man and the Holy Trinity and the whole thing that goes along with it. But how do you feel about all this new wave, everything that's been going around for 15, 20 years? And then you talk to people and they eventually come back to where they started and go, "Why didn't I see it when I was here the first time?"
It's amazing you ask that question, Gary. And to answer your question real simply, there was a song, Michael Franks. I'm sure you're probably familiar with him, jazz musician.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Michael Franks had a song called "Was There All Along on the Inside."
Yeah.
Yeah. He talked about how he in search of an image that did not exist, and he searched the entire lifetime, but it was there all along on the inside. And in seminary, Of course, we studied the five major belief systems: Catholicism, Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, and of course Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the more particular stories that I always find amazing, and I would challenge your readers, your listeners, to read, study, learn. There, even in the military, Gary and I had to study our opposition, whether we liked it or
you had to know who your enemy was. You had to know who the
to
opposition was. Yeah.
Absolutely. So to the listeners, I challenge you to go and read. Don't take somebody's opinion for something, and if you discover what it is that you felt or had heard, then you will find the truth. But there's a chance that you might possibly learn something that you didn't know. However, the story of Buddha, of course, Buddha left home in search of nirvana and ultimately found himself back at home, and he sat under a tree and was frustrated. And he shared with one of his servants, what have you, that he was going to go to sleep and he wasn't going to wake up. And so a year or two later, somebody finally awakened him and said, well, Buddha, what's the problem? He said, well, I went around the world and searched for a nirvana, a peace, a bliss, only to discover that everything that I needed was on the inside.
Mm-hmm.
And so to those that are in search, I can assure you wholeheartedly that what you're looking for is on the inside of you.
Mm-hmm.
It exists. It is alive and well. Now what you have to do is acknowledge the pain first. And once you acknowledge the pain, you're going to discover the power that lies within you. That is a natural fact.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that appears to be negative will ultimately be used to work for your good, because there's a story that Gary can't tell, that David can't tell, that only you can tell.
Mm-hmm.
But as long as you're telling someone else's story, your power is not going to be there. You might be good, perhaps, but your greatness is going to come from telling your story. The Bible reminds us that they will overcome by the words of your testimony. Not Gary's, not David's, the words of your testimony.
We're talking to David K. Jackson, author of Life in the Second Half. We win no matter what happened yesterday. Today is your second half. David, how can they get a hold of your book? I mean, you were gracious enough to send me a copy, and I really have enjoyed reading this, but where can they get a copy of this book?
Great question, Gary. The book is available on Amazon.com, Books A Million, BarnesandNobles.com, as well as on the iPhone. If you have the iPhone, you can go to the iStore. Not only is it available, it allows you to preview the book. I think you can read the first 10 pages there. And it's also available on our website at www.davidkjackson.com. And you can order it as well on the website.
Oh, and by the way, when you talk to Nicole, tell her thank you very, very much. Having you on is really a wonderful pleasure. Let's talk a little bit about Chapter 7, Unsung Heroes. Talk a little bit about your uncle's run-in with the Klan and how he learned through that like you and I learned in the military, or someone who plays sports, that ultimately it's a team game and sometimes you got to take one for the team. Talk about his experience with the Klan.
Absolutely. My uncle, whose surname was Robert Sims Jr., my grandfather, long story short story, was born in Perry County, Alabama, and in around 1921, 22, somewhere right there. He was born in 1912. He was run out of his hometown to Montgomery, Alabama. And having been born in Perry County, Alabama, he's related to the Scotts. Of course, you know Coretta Scott King.
Right.
And so years later, when the Civil Rights Movement began, my grandparents, I should say, gave legal guardianship to Hosea Williams, who was a lieutenant for Martin Luther King Jr., of course. And part of my uncle's responsibility when he wasn't babysitting the babies or the children of the civil rights leaders was to go into school settings and, as for lack of a better term, rebel rouse the youth. And so he was dispatched to Anniston, Alabama, to go and round up the youth for a rally and a march for the right to vote. Well, word got to Anniston, Alabama, that this man was on the way as an outside agitator to cause trouble in their city. And by the time my uncle had gotten to Anniston, he saw the Klan and the police cars and the whole nine, and the word finally got to the back of the bus where he was riding that they were looking for a man that was coming in as an outside agitator. By the way, my uncle was of small stature.
Yeah.
At 16 years old, you can imagine he probably looked like he was 12, 11 or 12 years old. He was a small fellow. And so the Klan did board the bus, and they went seat to seat looking for this man.
Yeah.
And my uncle was oblivious of the fact that the man that they were looking for was, in fact, him.
Huh.
So he gets off the bus. He goes on his way, walks by the Klan. He sees them. They see him, and had no idea that they were looking for him the entire time. And he makes his way to the school, and Anderson now has the right to vote. But these are unsung heroes. In other words, these are the heroes. These are the stories that no one would ever hear about because he didn't do it for self-aggrandizement. He didn't do it that his name might be made famous. He did it that his future, his nephews, his sons, his daughters, those of children that never knew anything about him or perhaps will never know anything about him might have a right to freedoms that we take for granted now, I believe, Gary.
Yeah, yeah. I found that to be a fascinating story because he could have reacted in so many different ways, and had he been of different stature, the Klan would have got a hold of him. They were and still are a blight on our society. They have a tendency to blame everybody for the fact that they aren't where they want to be, and usually they're the most ignorant people God ever put on earth. Let's talk. Go ahead.
It's amazing, but Gary, they have a role too.
You talk about that in chapter 12 about the doubters, the haters, and the liars. They do play a role in the world, I guess, to show us, and you'll correct me, to show us what you shouldn't be, and you're not in God's light when you are that. Although I got to admit, most of us now all tell little white lies at some time or another, and sometimes even big whoppers.
Absolutely, and DHL, I share that story quite often with people when they're in the midst of, as we were talking about a few minutes ago, when you're going through depression, when you're feeling like you want to give up. Your gift, your deliverance, your hope, your faith, whatever it is that you're holding on for, is going to be delivered by DHL. And of course, we know DHL as a courier service, the big yellow deal with the bright red letters, DHL. I said, but in this capacity, DHL is going to be of another nature. It will be your doubters, your haters, and your liars. Because see, your doubters said you never make it. Your haters are frustrated that you did, and your liars are going to lie because you succeeded against all the odds.
Yes.
So you have to hang in there and live out that text that says, I will make, first of all, your enemies your footstool. Then he turns around and he says, I'll prepare a table in the presence of your enemies. So without enemies, who will we be?
Yeah, true. My grandfather always used to say the best revenge was your success, or whatever it is your enemies didn't want you to achieve.
My grandfather would tell the story, Gary. I told you he was very symbolic. He would take me out to trees, and he said, "You see that tree right there, son?" I said, "Yes, sir." "What does it have on it?" I said, "Nothing." He said, "Well, you see that tree right there?" "Yes, sir." "What does it have on it?" "Apples." "Now, which tree would you suppose somebody would throw at?" I said, "The tree with apples." He said, "Absolutely. That's why they're throwing at you, son." Yeah. And I'd walk away, scratching my head like, "What in the world?"
Yeah.
But what he was saying symbolically was, they don't in football. If they hit you and you don't have the ball, Gary, it's a penalty.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're getting hit, it's because you have the ball, and not only that, you have the ball, you're in the position to score, and so they're threatened.
Right. Right. In chapter 11, you talk about discovery before recovery. Talk about self-discovery and the different meanings of the word: spiritual, enlightenment, love, and freedom.
Excuse me. Well, discovery before recovery is simply, again, the challenge of oneself. Getting in that mirror and accepting whatever it is that the mirror, and I tell people all the time, oftentimes when we are in the presence of the mirror, we want to do one or two things. Either we want to break the mirror because we don't like what we see in it, or we want to walk away from the mirror, having not changed what was in the mirror once we arrive. But in discovering, in order to recover, you have to be honest with what's in the mirror and begin to do a self-assessment and decree as you said, looking at the self, and I took the word self. In order to examine yourself, there are 4 things that are necessary. You have to have a spiritual relationship. A spiritual relationship. Once you gain a spiritual relationship, then God provides you with enlightenment. And once you gain enlightenment, therefore you're equipped to love. And once you learn to love, ultimately you're free. Spirituality, enlightenment, love, and freedom. That's what self represents. And when you gain those 4 things, you've accomplished a multitude. You've overcome a multitude of problems.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like I said, this book is so wonderful. We're talking to David K. Jackson, the author of Life in the Second Half. We win no matter what happened yesterday, today. This is the second half. In chapter 11, you write, no matter how well you prepare for the game or perhaps have planned, rest assured that the following halftime and second half is coming and the game must be complete. You were born prepared and equipped to win. Do people understand that God does give you, and through the Holy Spirit, as you travel through life, God gives you the thoughts in your brain to go and do this, and he also equips you with the ability to find the knowledge or gives you the knowledge. Jesus was, and I hate to use this term, but it's true. He was illiterate. He couldn't read or write. Yet he was prepared to stand before thousands and give sermons, give speeches, and he understood things better than somebody who was probably educated for his time, which proves to me that God will prepare you if you listen for the challenges that are in your life for what he wants you to do to bring more glory to himself as well as to you.
Absolutely. There's a cliche that says when his strength is placed upon, when his super is placed upon our natural, then supernatural things occur. But first of all, in order for that to occur, he reminds us in Proverbs, he said, first of all, acknowledge me in all thy ways. Lean not to thine own understanding, but acknowledge me in all thine ways, and I will direct your path.
Mm-hmm.
And then James comes back, and he reminds us, he says, if any man lacks wisdom, let him ask.
Yeah.
We have to put ourselves in a position of receivership, being open to the possibility that there is more. There's more to me. There's more to life. I can learn from the most diverse, the most weird, the most homeliest, if that's a word. I mean, it doesn't matter. If you're open to possibility, it can show up anywhere.
Mm-hmm. Through adversity, which is chapter 12, the adventures of adversity, through adversity comes victory.
Absolutely. That there are advantages in adversity. And it is in, I share the story, I use the analogy, Gary, of the teacup. Imagine a teacup with cold water in it. And you place a tea bag within the teacup and nothing happens.
Mm-hmm.
Such are our lives, and for example's sake. In other words, it's only when God places us in hot water that we do the same thing that the tea bag does. We produce.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. Adversity is something that we all go through. Some people learn to bend with it. Some people question it. Some people, I have over the last 25 years of my life used it as a way to say, all right, what am I supposed to learn here? What is the universe? What is God telling me? What do I need to overcome? And how do I learn to get past these different obstacles? But you also talk in chapter 12 about when your friends walk away from you in times of trouble, like the old cliche, you find out who your real friends are when you're down and out. What do you do about that? What do you say to yourself when those things are going through your mind, when nobody wants to be around you, when things are going rough, and there really is only one entity there, and God is there with you. He's walking with you like footsteps in the sand.
Well, again, I believe and I think earlier in the book I talk about your vantage point determines your view. It won't be what you see; it'll be how you see it. And you can take on a negative posture, and what you'll discover is once you adopt or adapt to that negative posture, it's going to remain. It seems like a continuous cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And that stems from, my grandfather would also share, for every test that you fail, you'll be made to try it again until you get it right.
Yeah.
That sounds illogical, but I have lived long enough in 50 years to discover that man was absolutely right. And now the circumstances could be different. The geographical setting could be different. But you will know when that test comes around again. So what we have to prepare ourselves to understand that no matter what the problem or the situation, within this situation or problem, within this adversity, within this hot water, lies an advantage, lies a promise, lies a promotion for me if I can see it through and not get so caught up into what they're going to say, where they are, and why they aren't here, and move forward with a positive attitude, knowing that the outcome is going to be to my benefit, not to my detriment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that a lot of times people, they get knocked down and they don't get back up again. It's like the old cliche, it doesn't matter how many times you get knocked down, it's what you do to get back up on your feet again. And I think sometimes people get knocked down in this world. They lose hope, they lose faith. And when they're knocked down, maybe for the last time, that's where they stay. What do you say to people out there that are listening that are maybe going through a bad time now? And I know that they should go and get your book, David K. Jackson's book, Life in the Second Half. Go to Amazon, go to Books A Million, which is one of my favorite places to go, or Barnes and Noble, and please pick this book up. It'll help change your life. It'll give you an awful lot to think about. But what do you say to somebody out there, David, that's going through a really bad time and they can't see the forest for the trees?
That your next breath signifies your second half. Don't give up. It is possible. In fact, I would encourage you to just repeat after me right now. I am possible. Mm-hmm. I am possible. I am possible. And if you say it long enough, what you'll discover is if we say things, we begin to see things. That's why we have to be careful and productive in what we say, because we're going to see what we say. So I know it's tough, and I know society, I know the odds, the bank, and the creditors, the doctor, or whomever the notifier is with the bad news or the negative news, but that is their opinion. As we were sharing, as Gary and I were sharing earlier, their opinions does not have to become your reality or your facts.
Yeah.
It's simply their opinion. And now I'm not saying to get into a hocus-pocus world and make-believe world. No, not at all. What I'm saying is stand firm, knowing that this too will pass, and it will. And even in the game of football, Gary, there were times when we'd be down a couple scores or a whole lot of scores sometimes. Mm-hmm. Coach would dummy the offense down. In other words, he would come in and he'd say, David, look, I'm not even worried about a score. Can you get me 3 yards?
Mm-hmm.
Like, wow, okay, yeah, I can get 3 yards. Then we get 3 yards. He said, can you get me 5? Can you get me 2 more? And what you'll discover is we've gotten a first down. And now he's starting to, because the whole key is small victories. See, a lot of times we want to go for the championship, but we haven't even earned a first down. Mm-hmm. So let's start today. Let's start right now. Inhale, and again, I am possible. And let's win in the next few minutes. Let's get a first down. And then if we get another first down, we'll find ourselves getting closer to the goal line. And oh, by the way, once you get close to the goal line defenders show up. Mm. So you got to be prepared to win.
Yeah, it gets even tougher.
But it should, because you're tough. Because you can.
David, do you think that we spend too much time preoccupied with what the Joneses are doing, comparing ourselves to other people? Oh, they have the fancy car, the big house, they got all this, they got all that. And we don't let go of our jealousies, our angers, our prejudices. And that is something we need to learn to all let go of in order to move forward.
Absolutely, Gary. In fact, I will go even further to say that I think it's a lack of accountability. We've gotten so affiliated now, party affiliations, religious affiliations, sister brotherly affiliations, and we're no longer calling right, and wrong. And we are empowering ourselves with people that I shared with my brother a couple of weeks ago. I said, listen, don't pat me on the back and charm me toward the edge of a cliff. Give me the cold, hard truth. I might not appreciate it in the moment, but saving my life. At some point, I realized, hey, had he not told me the truth, I would have went over that cliff. But I think what is happening, because Gary is, let's just say, an independent, and Gary says that all of a sudden it's okay. David is a Republican, and David says this, and it shouldn't matter. Partisan party politics, affiliations has sent our country into a tailspin that I'm concerned as to how we're going to recover from it, because we're no longer calling right, and wrong. It's based on affiliations, and we have to grow back to a point in time when you served, Gary. That was integrity. When you served, that was accountability. You did your job knowing that you had a job to do. You knew that people were dependent upon you.
Yeah, absolutely. We're so caught up. We wear our politics like we do our favorite teams on our sleeves, and if somebody doubts us, we get terribly angry. This last election cost a lot of people friendships. I know it did in my case. And I'm not going to get into it now because this isn't the right time or place, but it does. We only got a couple of minutes left, David, and I'm talking to David Jackson, who is the author of Life in the Second Half. We win no matter what happened yesterday. Today is your second half. Please go out and get this book. David, what do you want people to take away from this book most of all?
That the book is, it was written for you, with you in mind. It's simply a message. It's not a very thick book. It's not a book that I was given instructions to write with impressing people. It was meant to impact people, to change lives, to challenge you to be the best. And I believe if you give this book a chance, and here's the challenge: it might not help you. You might be at that point in your status or your life where you care less about a second half. Want for your brother what you desire for yourself. Give it to somebody that, Gary, we have 22 veterans a day that are committing suicide. Listen, go and get a book for a veteran. Gary's a veteran. I'm a veteran. I know where they are. I deal with PTSD as well. So encourage somebody else. To those that have made it and you got it and got it going on, so forth and so on, congratulations. But there is still a segment of society and it's not about giving away something. It's not about looking out for, whatever the terminology. We are servants. Somebody's got to get up in the room and begin to serve. Yeah. It
is a shame that the people that serve our country and have given the ultimate sacrifice are well taken care of at this point, as far as the parades and all that. But when it's all said and done, we have men who are fighting and young women fighting overseas, and their spouses back here are on food stamps and other things. And it's only going to get worse if this bill that the president wants to pass through his budget plan is even going to be worse, even though they say they're going to expand government spending. We have been talking to David Jackson, the author of Life in the Second Half. We win no matter what happened yesterday. Today is your second half. And believe me, ladies and gentlemen, I really, truly believe that get this book, read it, enjoy it. You truly will. David, I want to thank you so much for joining us here tonight on The Express. Hope you enjoyed it. I will be in touch with you maybe in about 15 minutes or so or less. But I thank you so much, sir, for joining us tonight.
Very well, Gary. The pleasure is all mine, and thank you for the opportunity. And God bless America. And again, we win. Life in the second half, we win.
Yes, we do. If we allow ourselves to be open to it, we will win. And that pretty much wraps up this episode of the Express. For those of you that are interested, I'm on Facebook at Gary Allen, ALAN. You can go to youtube.com, Gary Allen, The Express. This program repeats itself on Thursday night at 7 o'clock on our sister station, diversitybroadcastnetwork.com, with our good friend Renee, progressivevoices.com, on demand and on their app. And very soon, you'll be able to hear my shows on The Sound 24/7. They've picked me up to present my shows to them. So I thank you all very much for taking the opportunity to join us. I look forward to being back with you next week. And until then, please take care of yourselves and each other.
You've been listening to The Express with Gary Allen. Join us here every Tuesday night at 10 for more captivating talk with Gary Allen. See you next time on The Express.